What if I told you with all this new technology, with this AI technology, we could hack your mind and teach you to do any skill that you wanted to learn? Play the guitar, copyright, edit videos, speak another language, communicate better with your spouse. We could program any of that in. Would you be excited? Well, we can't, but you can. And I want to give you guys a simple visual illustration that might inspire you and help you learn how to do it. So I've kind of had an obsession for a number of years with neuroplasticity and psychology and marketing and why people do what they do in their behaviors. And I've been fascinated with it and studying it. And last year, I also started learning the Python language for coding. And it was fascinating to me because I see our subconscious and our brain as a hard drive, as a computer, and it just has applications written on it. And so something simple I want you to understand. So in that coding, so let's say I'm building a calculator, writing the code to build a calculator app that you could download on your phone. And I have to go in and put the information in for what 2 plus 2 equals and all of those. So the numbers know how to respond and correlate to each other. But I can simply change the code underneath and I can make 2 plus 2 equal 5. And every time you hit it on the app, it's going to come up 5. So it's just a reprogramming of what is written on underneath. And that is a truth about us as well. So I want to show you something real quick as a visual, and I hope it helps. All right, I got my mic out of my hand. So whenever you have a new experience, what happens is there's a synapses connection. And let's just keep it simple. There's a new neural connection, a new wire formed. I hope you guys can see this thread in your brain. It connects. It's very thin. It's got some information that can travel across it. I've never played pickleball before. I've never driven a car before. So this connection happens and information starts traveling over.
What you're looking at here are 2 neurons under the microscope that I've filmed. And if you wait really patiently, you'll be able to see them connecting to one another.
But you've only done it once or twice. The connection's not very strong. A lot of information has not traveled over, and it's easily broken because it hasn't been used a lot and because it doesn't have a lot of information and it doesn't have a lot of experience. So when you go to the gym or you start a diet and you fail after 1 or 2 times, a lot of it has to do with you just haven't built the pathway strong enough. But what happens if I do that thing or eat that thing and start adding an illustration for adding with another connection wrapping around it? Now what happens when I've done this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times? You know how they talk about habits. For most people, don't become a habit. It used to be 21 days. Now people are saying something more like 40, 60, depending on you, your personality, and your wiring, your current wiring, and your skill sets. It could take up to a year, I think some people have said. But the idea is the more times I do something and do it correctly, repetition is the mother of all learning. We've heard that, right? These neural connections strengthen and you get more and more wrapped around it. And then when you've got 2 or 3, it becomes much harder to break the habit. It becomes much harder to break the experience. So let's tell it in a story form that you're easily going to understand. The first time you drove a vehicle and you got in the car, I guarantee that you were a little shook, trying to remember everything. The mirrors have to be this way. The seat has to be this way. The driving instructor or your father or whoever was beside you, and it made you nervous and you couldn't have the radio on. And then it was like, especially if it was stick, clutch stick or shift and reverse. Did I check behind me? All that stuff, right? 1,000 things to remember in this experience. And we were nervous and we were scared, and you're going out on the road and you're scared of the other cars and emerging traffic and all the stuff you have to learn. But what happens after you've done it week after week, year after year? It's not long before you're driving a stick, and I've seen you guys smoking a cigarette, eating a cheeseburger, changing gears and the radio while texting on your phone. Another example, how this gets so ingrained in our subconscious, the activity that we couldn't do before, that we were scared to do before, but with repetition and reinforcing these neural connections, there's so much information that slides across it now so easily because of the strength of it. We don't even think about it anymore. It becomes a reaction. It just becomes a subconscious habit that we do. I have been driving, and I bet you have too, and been lost in a conversation on the phone, or been lost in listening to a podcast, or even daydreaming, and drove right past my exit. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I missed my exit. I was lost in thought. I didn't even remember the last 15 minutes driving. That's a scary thought, right? Driving to 70 miles per hour, 65 miles per hour down a highway, putting other people's lives in danger, and you don't even realize you do it because you're on autopilot. It's hardwired in you now because you've done it so much. You can do that with just about anything. It just takes intention and repetition. Now I'm going to give you a secret. Here's the secret part that most people don't talk about and don't understand. You want to amplify this and make it, the connections grow faster. Attach significant emotion and meaning to it. And those, instead of one band on the second time goes around and reinforces it, 5 will go around and reinforcing it. The stronger the meaning, the stronger the emotion. Those two things you can attach to it, the quicker this thing will become a part of your DNA and your experience. So I was a bad language student. Here's another story for you. I studied Spanish 2 years. I was the worst, and I couldn't say anything in Spanish after 2 years other than hola, me nombre es Juan, and like chimichanga, Taco Bell. That was about it. Sí and no. Vamos. I had a few. Baño. See, I don't remember. I couldn't do it. I was a bad language student. And I said for a decade, I'm no good at languages. I'm a bad language student. I wish I could learn. I studied Spanish 2 years. It didn't work for me. My mind's not wired like that, right? Lies in my programming. I moved to Brazil, and guess what happened? I lost my independence because I couldn't speak the language and get around. So I had meaning. I had a reason, and I had some emotion of frustration and desire to want to have my independence back. I wanted to be able to tell the taxi driver how to get me home. I wanted to be able to tell the waiter I wanted my steak medium well. I wanted to be able to tell the dry cleaners heavy starch. I could do none of that. I couldn't go pay my rent by myself. I hated it as a grown man. But that frustration caused me to learn enough to start navigating around and get around. And then you know what happened? I fell in love with the Brazilian. And honey, love is motivation. I wanted to sweep her off her feet with the best words I could come up with. And I wanted to know her intimately. And I wanted to get into her brain and let her know how smart I was, because I was only speaking like a 4-year-old in Portuguese. And so I started learning Portuguese much easier. It started coming much quicker, and I had much more desire to do it. And because that emotion attached to it, things stuck, man, and just became very strong, very quick. Now, keep in mind, this also happens with bad experiences, right? I got somebody hit me at the side of my car, T-boned me, they call it. Turned my car up on the side, pushed me across an intersection. This was a guy that ran a red light, didn't touch the brakes, just right T-boned into me and turned me over. And that experience, there's a lot of emotion, fear that got wrapped around that really fast. I can't pull through an intersection now with about 14 head checks. I pull out slowly. People behind me are frustrated, and I'm looking both ways. But I had this experience, this emotional, deep experience that quickly wrapped and became part of me. And the fear and the meaning I assigned to it. This is what happens with trauma. This is what happens with abuse. This is what happens with heartbreak. A lot of these things have emotional experiences, but if we don't revisit them, if we don't keep thinking about them, and we start telling ourselves new stories, you know what happens? Atrophy sets in. The cord starts unwinding. And it unwinds some more, and it unwinds some more. And you start losing the ability to do that. If I don't speak the Portuguese, I'm going to lose it. You may have been a great baseball player, but if you haven't swung a bat in 15 years and you go to the batting cage and you just miss, and you can't believe it. But if we don't use something, It doesn't matter what it is. It's an inflation of life, inflation of the universe. Atrophy sets in, it starts diminishing, and it starts becoming weak. And you're going to lose it. You can do that with your traumas and your issues too. If you don't pay attention to them, you don't focus them, you don't have emotions attached to them, you don't relive them, then it starts weakening the connection that it has. And also you need to be reassigning those stories, retelling those stories, making new stories with strong emotions as well. Those are some ways that we can deal with stuff in our life. It's all about the meaning we assign, right? I had somebody in a coaching session this week, and the guy splitting up with his significant other. And he said, man, one of the most embarrassing parts is I'm going to have to move out of this house and probably go live with my son in this dinky apartment. And I said, embarrassing. I said, wait a minute. You just told me your son had some issues he's going through. And he said, yeah. And I said, you were given a gift. Like God has moved the pieces around so that you could live with this son who needs you in this current moment. And you need him actually because you're going through something, and you guys rebuild your lives together and feed off of one another, support one another. What a gift. What an opportunity. See, that's the story I would have been telling myself, not, oh, the shame I have to go live in this small place with my son after being successful in this big house. It's all about the meaning we assign to the stories we tell about ourselves. But I wanted you to have that illustration about the neurosynapses, how they connect and how you strengthen them. So you start doing something, it doesn't feel easy, and it never does. Like the first 20 hours, right? The first 20 times you do it, you suck at it. It doesn't matter what it is. Any new thing you do, you're going to suck, and you're not going to like it. You're not going to enjoy the apples when you're used to cake. You're not going to enjoy the working out. But if you just keep going back long enough till those chords get strong, it becomes part of your identity. And just like driving 15 minutes without even thinking about it, your brain scanning for all the right things, the right pressure on the gas pedal, keeping an eye out for oncoming traffic, the lights, the stop signs, the police, everything. Your brain's doing all that, and you're off in la la land because you built those connections so strong in the subconscious now that they're just a part of you. You can do that with anything. Go reprogram yourself.